Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. This week has seen renewed developments in the Ukraine peace process, with Russia signaling conditional openness to a U.S. proposed plan, while European and Ukrainian leaders express concern over territorial concessions. The complex negotiations, internal U.S. rivalries, and battlefield realities make the path to peace a challenge. We're going to go through the latest and analyze the past days. We're now joined by Eoin Micheál McNamara, a researcher from the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Good to have you back on TVP World. Good morning.
Great to be here again. Good morning.
Oh, and let's start with the latest. We have quite an odyssey of the last few days, but this statement just from the last day of Vladimir Putin, pretty much doubling down on his demands, at the same time calling Zelenskyy illegitimate. So with statements like that, where does that leave us in the future of movement of any way of peace?
I mean, Volodymyr Zelenskyy is not an illegitimate president. He was a democratically elected president. And of course, his term was prolonged because of circumstances that Vladimir Putin imposed on him, namely this escalated aggression in Ukraine. So this is just more disinfo, more hybrid tactics, more effort to confuse the debate from Vladimir Putin, but that is to be expected at this stage. It's a very common occurrence.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, we also have from the Ukrainian side, from Zelensky's top aide, Mr. Yermak, saying that Ukraine will not cede any territory. I mean, at this point, looking at how this deal was touted as optimistic by Donald Trump, where are we realistically now in terms of this moving forward? What's your view on that?
Well, I think if we go back to the 28-point plan, I mean, if that was a Russian wish list, their demand was to take the whole of the Donbas de jure, even areas of the Donbas that they currently don't militarily control. So really, that was a land grab. We shall see. I mean, I don't think in the current political environment, the current strategic environment, there's any easy way out of this through negotiations in the short term. There's no silver bullet. Even now, I think the best case is some negotiations to negotiate some sort of de facto borders there, or some sort of line of control in the east of Ukraine, some sort of ceasefire. But of course, that leaves a grand point of tension right in the heart of Europe. And of course, that tension and that, were this to be the case, that prospect of another war would loom over Ukraine and of Europe into the future. So that is not ideal either. So I don't see any easy solutions at this time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's a complex, as you said, not an easy situation. There's a lot of pressure from different sides. Now, one key person, of course, that we already touched on is President Zelenskyy of Ukraine. I'm curious what you make of the recent developments on Thursday, in fact, with the anti-corruption organizations NABU and SAPO actually going through and searching the government quarter in Kyiv. What does that indicate to us? I mean, this is more pressure on Zelenskyy. How is this going to impact Kyiv and Ukraine's position, if at all?
Well, I come at this actually a lot of the time. My perspective on Ukraine, I have a lot of Ukrainian friends and a lot of friends who are experts on Ukraine. Before I worked at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs, I taught for many years at the University of Tartu in Estonia, at the political science department there, where I did my PhD. And we had many Ukrainian students. So, I mean, my message is in that regard, I mean, this corruption, these oligarchs, these people trying to convert political power into, private greed, they must be cleaned out. But and I mentioned my previous experience in this regard, what's very important is there's a new generation, that generational shift in Ukraine. There's a new generation of Ukrainians there. I've taught some of them, I know many of them, and they want to bring the country forward. There's no Berlin walls and there's no barbed wire anymore. They see great success stories like Poland, like the Baltic states. They've studied in these countries, like I mentioned, and they want that future for their own country, that great social transformation into prosperity, assisted by the European Union and indeed by NATO when we talk about the Baltic states and Poland. So let's root out the corruption. That's Ukraine's past, but let's also think about Ukraine's future as well, because there's a bright young generation coming up there, and I cannot speak up that generation enough. That's really a point of optimism.
All right, so an optimistic assessment of the youth, but nevertheless, I mean, there's going to be pressure on Ukraine's current political leadership, and I think that's going to be felt in some way. We'll see how. But let's also talk about the U.S. as well. I mean, critical component in all this. We've also seen this rivalry percolate a little bit with Marco Rubio, Vance, also different players, Witkoff, also with that leak in there. I'm just curious also of some of this recent research, actually, of the last few days, actually looking at some of these senior Republicans, Mitch McConnell for one, who's calling this peace plan put by the United States as appeasement. There's also some research from the Vanderbilt group saying that over 72% of actual Republicans favor a fair deal with on the side of actually Ukraine, that the United States respects Ukraine. So with that kind of pressure, how does that impact negotiations? How does it impact Trump's base and his policies?
The Republican Party in the United States is really fluctuating wildly at the moment between MAGA strands that seem to favor Trump and Trump's kind of levitating with appeasement and tough talk on Russia, and then the kind of old school policy, the old Reaganite policy, if you will, of the Republican Party, that like a tough stance and an emphasis on Europe whole, free and at peace. And at this stage, that includes Ukraine. That's good for the West, good for Western interests, good for European integration, and of course, very good for US power as well. We shouldn't forget that. A Europe whole, free and at peace, if we can ever get there, will be excellent for US interests, because of course that leaves the US free to project its power elsewhere if European security is locked down. So, I mean, I think these signs out of the Republican Party going back to the old school ways are encouraging, but I wouldn't expect this to be the prevalent view. I would expect a rocky road to come. Mm-hmm.
But
unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, rocky road, that's what we're on at the moment. But it's, I think, significant that, as you said, that actually 72% of Republicans, according to this research, are very much saying that Russia should be held accountable. So I think, if anything, that does seem that, that could impact policy in a level, or that Trump has to take that seriously. Let's also jump over to some other former American diplomats, including also Daniel Fried, for instance, who has actually commented to this station, saying that Witkoff is being used to ram and jam through Russian policy. I mean, how much to an extent is there manipulation on the Russian side of this plan?
Well, I mean, the manipulation of the Russian side is very, very worrying and very, very unusual. I mean, when we look at Witkoff, why is he asking Uzhakov and these Kremlin aides for advice on U.S. policy? I mean, why isn't he asking Radek Sikorski? Why isn't he asking Alexander Stubb? Why isn't he asking President Alarkaris of Estonia? I mean, these countries at the NATO and EU front line who really know Russia, who can really give the United States good advice on the pitfalls of negotiating Russia. I mean, when we look at Witkoff, I think, I mean, if you're trying to negotiate some sort of real estate deal in Manhattan or in downtown Boston. Maybe this is the way you cajole people, but he's shown himself to be way out of his depth. The geopolitical stakes are very, very high, and this is not how you operate at this level. So, I mean, it's concerning for European security, and it's concerning for US power and US national interests that they're making such self-enforced errors internally.
Mm-hmm. And also, I mean, one side to throw in as well, the European side. I mean, just this week, the European Parliament has pretty much called the U.S. peace proposal ambiguous and has very much condemned this so-called peace proposal. I mean, given the Europeans' role, I mean, it's all these institutions of the EU, but nevertheless, that statement, how much weight does that carry? How much will that be listened to by other European leaders and by, for instance, the United States and Russia?
Well, the unfortunate thing for Europe, I mean, the European Union does not have enough power, you know, as power converts, military power converts into diplomatic clout. The European Union does not have enough of that to impose itself on this process and to essentially dictate any part of the framework in this process. So it's essentially relegated to the sidelines and commenting its ideas on a peace process in Ukraine, unfortunately, have been made irrelevant. So until Europe picks up the pace in terms of developing, you know, a full spectrum toolkit in terms of its power, this is likely to remain the case, unfortunately. And it's very unfortunate, of course, because this is a crisis that's going on Europe's doorstep, and it can't do much to shape it. It's completely at the mercy of US-Russia negotiations. It seems right now some of these talks taking place in the Gulf states, Europe is very marginal. So this needs to change, but it's something that's unlikely to change quickly.
Mm-hmm. Right. And also, I just want to get your sense of the military reality on the ground in Ukraine. And we've seen a lot of movement as well. We've seen, unfortunately, continued bombardment of Ukrainian cities, but also in particular on the battlefront. If we're looking at Pokrovsk in the Donbas, if we're looking at that fortress belt, how much does that impact leverage that either side has at this point?
Well, it's very, very important. And I mean, when I say this, I mean, I mentioned, I mean, it's point of personal emotion. Me, you see some of your former students who studied with me at the University of Tartu. You see them going off to the front. You see some of them coming back and getting medals, and you're so proud of them. And it takes an immense sacrifice from the Ukrainian people, and we should never ever forget this. But I think a lot of the big story right now, beyond Pokrovsk, is a lot of the reporting we're seeing in the last few days on the state of the Russian economy and its struggles. There was like a 10 trillion ruble hole, by all accounts, found in the Russian banking system. The bubble, the war economy bubble, keeping the Russian economy going. In the short term, this might make Putin more aggressive because he wants to keep that bubble going. If not, he's in dire straits with his economy, which will come up with political reverberations. But in the long term, the reckoning is going to come. This is unsustainable for Russia. From a Ukrainian perspective, it's about resilience. It's about staying in the game, staying in the battlefield, and grinding Russia down. And I think in the Western world, in the United States and the European Union, we should be doing our utmost to ensure Ukraine gets that support, because that is a glimmer of hope in terms of securing a fair and just peace for Ukraine.
Okay, so I mean, a fair and just peace for Ukraine. It's been quite a week, and we'll see how these developments progress. Look, thanks so much for all your thoughts there and your insights. That was Eoin Micheál McNamara there. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much, sir.
And thank you for joining us here on TVP World. But stay tuned, there's much more, so don't go away.